The Edmonton Oilers are off to an 0-3 start, and while many are focusing on the defense, on today's edition of Locked On Oilers, we are going to talk about why I am more focused on the offense.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Monday edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. I want to thank everyone who is making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So on today's edition of Locked On Oilers, we are going to diagnose some of the issues the Oilers are having as they've gotten off to this 0-3 start. We are going to talk a little bit about the offense, a little bit about the defense, what they might be able to do to change things up. The first segment, we are going to tackle what the shot metrics and the control of play say about how they've gotten off, the start they've gotten off to. Our second segment, we're going to talk about the defense, why the volatility, why the inconsistency of pairings, why lack of workload together in the preseason. And then our third and final segment, we are going to tackle as to whether or not the problems the Oilers are having are a skill issue or if they are a discretionary feel issue. So starting off at the outset, you might be surprised to hear me say I want to talk about the offense on a team that is playing really bad defense. But I think those two components are inherently connected. I think the fact the Oilers have gotten off to such a slow start offensively is killing them defensively. You know, I for people who listen to the show over the summer, who listen to the show during preseason training camp, the everydayers, they know I spent the entire offseason pounding my desk saying, it doesn't matter if the Oilers defense is bad, all they have to do is play more offense. And because the Oilers offense is off to such a slow start, they're only shooting 2% at 5-on-5. They've only scored at 2 5-on-5 goals through 3 games. Because of that, there is an enhanced microscope on the defense. The defense is being juggled around, whether we have Emberson and Stetcher or Dermott and Stetcher or Dermott and Emberson, whatever permutation of defensemen have drawn in, because the Oilers aren't scoring a lot, it is putting more pressure on the defense to be the difference. And when the defense hasn't been able to be the difference, it's asking Skinner to be the difference. And it creates a trickle-down effect. When you are trailing in games, it becomes a lot more difficult to get back in them, because hockey in particular, the way the score impacts how teams play, it is really, really direct in the sense that when a team gets a lead, they are going to adopt a more defensive posture. They are going to crash down towards their own net. They are going to get in shooting lanes, block shots, try and get sticks on shots, deflect shots, and they're more than content to allow the Oilers to shoot from the point, the top of the circles, the half wall. Those are low quality scoring chances. So the volume of scoring chances looks right, but the Oilers' lack of dangerous scoring chances, that to me is where the Oilers make their money. When they get that puck below the goal line, behind the net, in and around the net front, Draisaitl on the offhand, you get Hyman in the net mouth, you get McDavid floating around the periphery trying to pick apart the defense. When you get that going, it looks very compressed and very tight, all in and around that space around the net mouth, and it creates those easy scoring chances for Zach Hyman, the tap-ins that so many people like to make fun of him for converting. Looking at the underlying numbers, I think you'll get a clear picture. So the Oilers have 203 scoring chances for, they've conceded 122 chances against. They have 82 shots on goal for, they have conceded 59 shots against. They have 2 goals for, 9 against. They have 7.42 expected goals. They've conceded 5.54 expected goals. They have generated 30 high danger scoring chances for. They've conceded 19 high danger chances against. They are shooting 2.44% from the field at 5-on-5, and they have an .847 save percentage. All of those stats are at 5-on-5. As the everydayers know, 5-on-5 is 80 to 85% of the game. It's what we focus on because it is the most trackable element of the game. There's a lot more game volatility on special teams, whether it's power play or penalty kill, where one extenuating circumstance, whether it be a super hot goalie carrying a penalty kill or a really good shooter going on a heater and going from, 17% to 24, 25% shooter because of the opportunities afforded to them on the power play, it is a lot more difficult to track the stability of offensive creation on the power play and defensive prevention on the penalty kill. And because of that, hockey lends itself to being analyzed mostly at 5-on-5 because it is the most consistent game state and it has enough of a sample that you can begin to determine what is a fad or a trend versus what's actually the case, what is the long-term outcome. So the fact that the Oilers have 120 more scoring chances than they do shots on goal, that tells me what I had just said before is accurate, that teams are okay with the Oilers taking a bunch of scoring chances from low-quality areas because they're going to miss the net or they're going to get blocked. Those low-quality chances are low quality because they have a low chance of going in. They have a lot more that can prevent them from going in than the tap in at the net mouth. You take a shot from the point, you take a shot from the circles, the half wall, you can miss the net entirely because you're trying to thread it through traffic. It can hit traffic on the way in. A player who is on the way in can actively get in the way and block it. And those factors in conjunction with poor defense is creating an air of offensive desperation, meaning because the Oilers know they need to score, they are getting the puck into the offensive zone and being more content to taking poorer quality chances because they feel that pressure. They know they need to score. They know they need to create offense. And without that offense, it is putting a lot more pressure on the defense. And the Oilers, they've been behind in these games. You get shut out, the other team is going to be fine with you taking pot shots from 40 feet away. That's their bread and butter. You do that, you're almost guaranteed to turn the puck over. They recover it, they dump it down, and they burn 45 seconds off. And the last thing I want to get in on this first segment before we take our first break today, you are watching the Oilers iron out the kinks that 10, 15 years ago would have been figured out in the preseason. Very similarly to what goes on in the NFL now, where the first few weeks of the NFL season are a matter of veterans and experienced players getting up to game speed after not participating in the preseason. You are watching the same thing. Most NHL teams do not have the ability to make that happen. Most NHL teams are going to find that if you are stuck offensively, if you are stuck defensively, and this early in the season, it's because your guys didn't do enough. And in the preseason, most teams are opting to play split squad or really limited squad games because they don't want to expose veteran players to chances of getting hurt. You saw it in the trio of games between Ottawa, Toronto, Montreal, where guys who were fringe NHLers were taking runs at star players because the environment of the preseason, it puts, I don't want to say it puts a target on the back of star players, but if you're a fringe guy who probably isn't making the team and you take a run at a Kirby Dach or a Tim Stützle, your team's going to say, well, he might not be great, but he'll die for the jersey. And because of that, we're more inclined to take a serious look at you. And when you're a team like the Oilers who has such high expectations, you don't want to expose your star players to that type of environment. So I get it. But you are watching the Oilers full squad iron out what would have been figured out in the preseason not that long ago. So on that note, we're going to take our first break of today's show. And then when we come back, we are going to start tackling some of the defensive issues coming up next on this edition of Locked On Oilers. Guys, ever feel like you need a little boost in the bedroom? It's time to stop worrying about your performance and get him so you can feel confident, knowing you can stay hard whenever you are in the mood. Hims is changing men's healthcare, providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable Hardmans, Viagra, and Cialis, and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits. Just answer a series of questions on their sites, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find the ED option that works for you. Start with your free online visit today at hims.com/locked on. That's HIMS.com/locked on for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/locked on. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this edition of Locked On Oilers, where we are diagnosing the Oilers' slow start. We are trying to make our way through a doubly sad Monday because A, it's Monday, and B, the Oilers are 0-3. And they losing to the Blackhawks, who are a bad team, and losing to the Flames, who are a bad team, and your provincial rival, it's not great. And I spent a lot of time last week talking about how the Oilers needed to decide how risk tolerant they were going to be, how much room for error they were going to afford guys who were trying to figure it out. Because what you ultimately determined as far as giving guys opportunities was going to have a trickle-down effect for the rest of your season. Because right now, it's clear the Oilers are struggling offensively, and it is putting more of a microscope on the defense. Because the defense has more of a microscope on it, the Oilers are looking for a quick, a sugar-high solution, if you will, to getting better defensive results. And that's why you saw Emberson come out. It's why you saw Stetcher go in. And still, I think the Oilers are kind of missing the boat. And I understand that the Oilers are not going to shoot 2% all year. You know, there's too much talent on this team. Between Hyman, Draisaitl, McDavid alone, Skinner is a career above average shooter. Arvidsson can be an above average shooter. With all of those players in the fold who are career above 10, 11%, those guys are all 14, 15, etc. Because of that, I can say these results are a bit these results through 3 games so far are a bit of bad luck. And that's not a satisfactory answer. That is not an answer you want to hear from Chris Knobloch. But from the outside looking in, watching the games, looking at the numbers, the Oilers just can't get a bounce yet. They are generating a lot of chances. They're low quality, so the inherent value of them is a little bit lower than what you would like. But the Oilers have had offensive chances to score. They have not converted enough of those chances to take some heat off of the defense. And chance creation rate-wise, it is okay. But the fact that they are generating so many poor quality chances, that is what is hurting them right now. And I looked this up and I did the math. Right now, the Oilers are being outscored 2-9 at 5-on-5. For the Oilers to score 7 more 5-on-5 goals at the current rate they are scoring, it would take 286 more shots on goal. For context, most teams are going to be in the ballpark of 30 shots on goal per game. So we're talking about a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks worth of games for the Oilers to get 7 more 5-on-5 goals at this current pace. Again, like I just said, that is not going to stay this way. The Oilers offense is going to figure it out. But because the offense is struggling, and I know I've repeated this exact line of threat, this exact thread of thought more than once, but the offense struggling is forcing the defense to do more. And we all know the defense is the weak link of this team. It does not have the talent. It does not have the individual puck moving ability to prevent being exploited. Because it is still a work in progress, you are watching that work be done in real time. Because Nurse, who we're going to talk about in a second, was limited injuries-wise in the preseason and training camp. He only got in 2 preseason games, if I remember correctly. He wasn't able to really forge a strong partnership with Ty Emberson because of that. He wasn't able to be up to game speed right away. And because he is working out his preseason in the real time, it is forcing whoever is playing with him to carry a bigger load. And I said this a few weeks ago. I'll say it again right now. I do think there's a world where the Oilers might be able to benefit from splitting up Ekholm and Bouchard. I know Ekholm and Bouchard are one of, if not the best defensive pairs in the entire NHL. But right now, the Oilers are getting good results from their first pair and from whoever is playing with Brett Kulak. And that second pair, no matter who it's been that's played with Nurse, whether it's Dermott, whether it's Emberson, whether it's Stetcher, has been able to get good results out of Darnell Nurse, which leads me to believe the Oilers are going to have to make a sacrificial decision. If you are okay with one defensive pair just being an outright liability for 20 minutes a game, okay. I personally feel you might be better off doing Ekholm with whichever of the righties you were going to play with Nurse, Bouchard with Nurse. Bouchard, you're going to dull his impact by putting him with somebody who isn't strong defensively. But Bouchard, if he is good enough, if Bouchard is as good as we all think he is, he will be able to carry Nurse along to passable results. And that gives you a more well-rounded, a 3-deep defensive pair, a three defensive pair deep group, and that in turn should be able to take some of the heat off of your offense. Remember, everything is interconnected. As much as we want to talk about offense, defense, goaltending as 3 different units, how each one plays impacts the other. And the one component of this I do want to talk about, and I wanted to mention in the first segment, but I didn't get around to because I ran out of time. You can tell the Oilers have had a perfect storm of bad situational factors. Number one, the emotional toll of going all the way to Game 7 of a Stanley Cup final and losing in the way you did, that weighs heavily on you. You have the roster turnover of the offseason, losing 3 forwards, losing 3 defensemen. You have to integrate new faces. You have all of that. Nurse, you have coming off of a serious injury, who doesn't opt for surgery, instead opts to come back. Limited preseason, limited training camp, so needs to work himself back into game shape as the games are being played. All of that together makes this so, I don't want to say obvious, but a few weeks ago, I thought this was in the cards. I figured a slow start was in the cards, mostly because of the roster turnover. You needed to figure out which forwards were going to play with which defensemen were going to play with which. I think we can all agree for the most part that the defense is the big question mark, but without the offense scoring, it is putting too much pressure on the defense, and the defense cannot realistically be expected to be as perfect as they would need to be to win games right now, the way the offense is going. You know, I made this allusion the other day when I was talking to someone, and if you're a listener, I don't know how much of recreational or school sports you played growing up, but you play Little League, you play football, you play hockey, you play soccer, whatever. The more you're in your own head thinking, I can't mess up, I can't mess up, I can't mess up, you're more likely to mess up because you're taking yourself out of the game. You want it to be instinctual, you want it to be reactionary. You just want to make the play that's in front of you because it is obvious. Right now, the Oilers are pressing, and that air of desperation is why you have that 120 split between shots on goal and scoring chances, because you're just throwing pucks at the net, hoping something happens. You don't have an actual plan of converting those scoring chances into actual goals, and it is creating this feedback system where the Oilers are winning the shot differential battle, but because they are taking such poor chances, they're not converting them. Because their defense is being asked to play perfectly, it is maybe feeling a bit too much pressure for it to handle. And all of that together is creating this environment where you're losing to teams like the Blackhawks and the Flames, who you should be smoking, frankly, on talent alone. A talent alone, the Oilers should be 2-1, if not 3-0. But talent alone does not win hockey games. Right now, the Oilers are not playing like a confident hockey team, and it is imperative for the Oilers to find their confidence again. We are going to take our next and final break of today's show, so be sure to stick around. NFL fans, you can spice up your NFL season over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Tonight, Monday Night Football, Buffalo Bills heading to MetLife Stadium to take on the Jets. The Jets fired Robert Saleh, Jeff Ulbrich, the interim head coach. Aaron Rodgers and the Jets looking to get back on the winning track. 1.5-point home underdogs. Next week, Sunday, London kick again. Drake May, who looked pretty good in his NFL debut, and the Patriots heading to Jacksonville to take on Trevor Lawrence and the reeling Jacksonville Jaguars, who are 5.5-point underdogs. My favorite game of the Sunday slate, though, CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans heading up to Green Bay to take on Jordan Love and the Packers. The Packers, 2.5-point home favorites. And of course, the Saquon Barkley Bowl. The Philadelphia Eagles going to New York to take on the Giants. The Eagles, 3.5-point road favorites. If you want to spice up your football Sunday, head on over to FanDuel.com to get started. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Monday edition of Locked On Oilers as we are coping with 0-3. And look, I am keeping a level head about all of this because I understand it is a long season. And you are going to hear me say that a lot over the course of the next 79 regular season games. I more likely than not will say how many games are remaining 1,000 times between now and middle of April when the playoffs start, because every single game has a certain amount of importance. And I try my best to not react to these losses the way you would react to a loss in, say, football, where a football season, if you're in college, it's 11 or 12 regular season games. If you're in the NFL, it's 17 regular season games. So each of those games has significantly more influence over the outcome of your entire season than an 82-game hockey season. Now, some of these games the Oilers have are more important than others. Your conference opponents and your division opponents, specifically more important because of the playoff format we have in our sport, where divisional games are 4-point swings because those are who you are in competition with for playoff spots. But I struggle to start sounding the alarm just yet because the Oilers have talent. They need to find a way to marry their talent and get that confidence going again. You get the confidence and you put the talent with it, you start to make some things happen. And I want the Oilers to have a set, hard, and fast way of handling adversity this season. Number one, we are talking about defense. We are talking about offense. Make a decision as far as Ty Emberson. Are we going to be lenient and let him figure it out, make mistakes, we'll take our lumps as we go? Or are we more inclined to say, well, we can't really afford to do that because we are digging out the hole? I want to see the Oilers find a way to put these guys in a position to succeed top to bottom. If that's juggling the defensive pairs entirely and splitting up Ekholm and Bouchard, if that's playing Dermott on the right with Nurse, if that's playing Stetcher, if it's giving Emberson another crack at it, if it's playing Bouchard, the Oilers' inability to get Darnell Nurse going on any consistent level is one of the reasons they are struggling. I don't think it is the most important or the single biggest reason they are struggling, but they need to get going offensively. That means, and you're about to hear me turn into a hockey player for a second here, but pucks in deep, crash the net, second chance scoring opportunities. When you are in a rut offensively, and the Oilers are in a rut when you're only scoring on 2% of your shots on goal, you have to crash the net. You have to outwork your opponents. And everybody is trying hard in hockey. Nobody is coasting. Nobody is just phoning it in. But there is a way to play engaged. There is a way to force the other team to play in a way that's going to get favorable results. The Oilers right now are sputtering. Their tires in mud. They're going really fast, but they're not going anywhere because they cannot generate enough offense. And more importantly, they cannot convert enough offense. Empty scoring chances are great. That is what has sustained the Carolina Hurricanes as analytical darlings for the better part of the last half decade. They generate a ton of volume. They crash the net. They get second chance. They get deflections, all of that good stuff. But when you get to the playoffs and you start playing teams that are better than you and their star players start putting you in a blender and saying, oh, okay, if you're just going to take 45 shots from the perimeter, go ahead. We're going to take those. We're going to recover them. We're going to go the other way on the counterattack and we're going to bleed you. Right now, the Oilers don't have any phase of their team going. The goaltending is not working. The defense is not working. The offense is not working. The Oilers are built front to back, meaning that if the offense isn't getting going, it puts too much pressure on the defense for it to handle. And that defense gets too much pressure on it to handle. It puts too much pressure on Stuart Skinner, which he cannot handle. It is inherently interconnected, and it is important to understand the relationship for the positional units of the Oilers. Because of the way the team is constructed, it has to play a certain way. The Oilers don't have 2, 3, 4 paths to victory. They can't really win rock fights. They can't really win when it comes down to defense and goaltending. You heard me say it a ton during the Stanley Cup final against Florida, if the difference between winning and losing in the series is Stuart Skinner, the Oilers are going to lose. The fact that the Oilers were able to get that far with Stuart Skinner, who is a slightly above average goalie, tells you they have the capability. They have the means of playing offense at a high level, but it's going to take a while to get that going. You know, you saw Skinner slide up with McDavid. He got on the sheet, first goal as an Oiler, and that's nice to see. We'll see how the Oilers want to shake out trying to solve these offensive issues. If that's changing up the lines, if it's juggling partnerships, if it's opting to play a little more aggressive or passive, whatever. The Oilers are going to need to adjust what they are doing so far because it is not working. It is not the end of the world. It is game 4 tomorrow. They do need to start showing signs of improvement, though, or otherwise, then we can start to have a conversation about maybe sounding an alarm. But that will do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. So if you could be so kind, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please give the show a 5-star review. We're trying to get to that magic number of 2,000 listens per week, 400 to 500 listens per day. Keep building that out. More subscribers, the easier it is to do that. Over on YouTube, we broke the 1,600 mark. Very grateful, very happy that we've doubled the subscriber count of the channel since I took over back in the middle of April, which leads me to believe that I kind of maybe know what I'm talking about a little bit. I'm not saying I'm smart by any stretch of the imagination, but at the very least, I am finding threads and interesting topics of conversation. If you're over on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the alarm bell, leave me a note. Let me know, what do you think is the biggest problem for the Oilers right now? I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Until then, let's go Oilers.